So, good day again everyone. So, today, let us continue our discussion. Our lesson for today is all about test validity. And I know we are already familiar because we already tackled this one. So, when we say test validity, it means that a test measures what is supposed to uh, measure. So, in simple words or in Tagalog, tama ba talaga yung sinusukat ng isang test? And a measure is valid when it measures what is supposed to measure, which means a test is valid when it actually measures the skill, the knowledge, or the ability or characteristics that it was designed to measure. So let's have an example for this one. So example, let's say I tell you, so this test measures the English students' English vocabulary, and then we proceed that next is we have the test questions. For example, what does enormous mean? Second, what is the antonym of happy, and what is the synonym of ancient? So this makes sense because the test questions measures English vocabulary. But then when I say that this test measures students' English vocabulary, and then the questions are what is 23 times 5, or who was the first president of the Philippines, and what is the capital of the Philippines. So these questions might be perfectly good questions, but it don't measure English vocabulary. So those tests would not be valid for that purpose. So let's take note that validity doesn't necessarily mean that is this test good, but it actually means that is this test appropriate for what we are trying to measure. So that's a very good distinction. So we have here some examples. First is the quarterly exam. So next we have this another example, which is the quarterly examination. So if the quarter examination is valid, its content should also be able directly connected to the objectives of the lesson or the curriculum. So let's have an example. For example, if the objectives of our lesson is all about to identify and understand different types of imagery, and then the test questions should also include those questions that measures the students' understanding about those types of imagery. So the questions really need to reflect what the students were is expected to learn. And next, we also have the personality test. And if a personality scale is designed to measure 5 different personality factors, the item under each factor should also actually measure that specific factor. So the items that are intended to measure the same personality trait should also show a strong relationship with one another. So we also have about entrance examination. So therefore, we can say that test validity is important. Why? Because it tells us whether a test is appropriate for its intended purpose. So we can say na ang valid test should measure the right thing based on what it was designed to measure. So in short, test validity should always measure the right thing for its purpose. So now let's proceed. We have the different types of validity. So first is the content validity. When we say content validity, it means that it checks if the questions in our test actually represents the content or skills that we want to measure. Let's have an example for this one. If our lesson again is about different types of imagery, and then our objectives is for students to identify those types. So our test should have also have questions about these types of imageries. Hindi pwedeng for example is puro about visual imagery na lang if natanong naman natin or naturo natin lahat ng types of imagery. And to establish content validity, first we compare yung test question sa objectives natin or sa lesson natin, and then the question should directly match what the students are expected to learn. And for achievement tests, we check if yung questions natin na measure niya yung learning objectives. For skills naman, we check if yung question nagmamatch ba siya sa definition of what we want to measure. And then after that, may magre-review na isang expert, like for example teacher, dun sa test na yon to see if yung those questions really match yung objectives natin or the content of the lesson. So in simple words, ang content validity as yung isang test nasa test ba yung important things na dapat nating sukatin, or in a shorter term, match ba yung question sa objectives natin. So that's a good content validity. So content validity checks if the test questions properly cover and represent the content and objectives that we want to measure. So next one, we have the phase validity. So next one, we have another type of validity, which is yung phase validity. So when we say phase validity, when the test is presented well, free of errors, and administered well. And then yung procedure naman po niya, the test items and layout are reviewed and tried out on a small group of respondents. A manual for administration can be made as a guide for the test administrators. So when we say phase validity, it means that it is about whether yung isang test, it looks proper, it is clear, and it is appropriate on the surface. So hindi lang niya tinatanong is does this test test the right thing, but also dito instead tinitingnan niya kung maayos ba talaga yung isang test, kung ito ay gagamitin. For example, imagine sa isang exam, maraming spelling and grammar errors, hindi maayos or hindi okay yung layout or maguling instructions, and also may questions na hindi clear. Kahit tama pa yung content natin, hindi siya magandang phase validity kasi mukhang poorly prepared yung isang test. And for the procedure, ang gagawin natin here is the test items and also the layout are reviewed first. Ibig sabihin, sine-check natin if may mga errors, may mga confusing instructions ba or problems sa isang format, sa isang test. And then after that, in establishing phase validity, the test can be tried na after nun on a small respondents, and dito titignan nila if they can understand the questions and also the instructions. And we also have a manual na binibigay or prepared to be a guide sa isang test administrator on how they can properly administer yung isang test. So, in simple words, phase validity, it asks us na maayos ba or clear and proper ba yung isang test sa unang tingin. So again, when we say content validity, dito tinatanong niya, match ba yung objectives? And when we say phase validity, maayos ba and clear ang isang test? And next one, we have the predictive validity. So in predictive validity, I will explain na po. So its meaning is, from its word, the predictive validity, as we can see dito sa PPT, it checks if yung result ng isang test can predict how someone will perform in the future. Unlike sa content validity, tinitingnan niya kung match yung question sa objectives. In predictive validity, it asks about, can this test result predict a future outcome? Let's have an example, yung entrance exam sa isang university. For example, when a student, for example, a student takes an entrance exam before entering a school. Then after ng first semester, we check their grades. If the students got a high entrance exam scores and also tend to have a high grade, then the entrance exam has good predictive validity. Why? Because its results were able to predict their future academic performances. So dito we have the procedure in predictive validity. So dito, a correlation coefficient is obtained where the x variable is used as the predictor and y variable as the criterion. Medyo, kung titingnan natin, medyo complicated but is simple. When we say correlation coefficient, it is simply a number that tells us how two things are strongly related to each other. For example, ang x natin is entrance exam score. Yun yung predictor natin. And then y naman is yung first semester grades ng isang student. So, this is the criterion or the future outcome we're trying to predict. And then after that, we will calculate their correlation. And then after that, if there is a strong relationship between the entrance exam scores and future grades, we can say that the test has a good predictive validity. So in simple words, when we say predictive validity, it asks, can the result of this test predict how someone will perform in the future? So again, balikan natin, when we say content validity, it questions match ba ang test sa objectives. And when we say case validity, maayos ba and clear yung isang test. And predictive validity, inaas nito, can the test predict future performance. And the next one, we also have the next validity, the construct validity. This means na chine-check natin whether the different questions sa isang test are really measuring the same underlying concept or characteristic. So a construct is something that we want to measure but cannot directly see or measure. Ano yung mga bagay ngayon? Like for example, intelligence, motivation, anxiety, self-confidence, and creativity. So let's have an example. Gumawa tayo ng isang test to measure students' motivation. We might have several questions like, I enjoy studying even when the lesson is difficult. I am willing to spend extra time studying, and I try my best to finish my schoolwork. So this question should be related to each other because they are all supposed to measure motivation. So basically, tinatanong niya dito, do the questions that are supposed to measure the same thing actually work together? So, para sa procedure ng validity natin na ito, the PPT says the person R can be used to correlate the items for each factor. So, when we say person R, it is simply a statistical method na ginagamit to check how strongly two things are related. So, we can use this person R to see if yung test items natin have a strong relationship with each other. So then there's a factor analysis. So factor analysis, when we see factor analysis, it is a technique na ginagamit natin to help us group together yung mga items that are strongly related because they may be measuring the same factor or construct. So let's have an example dito. Imagine we have 15 questions and in a personality test. So the factor analysis might show that question 1 to 5 strongly related, which is in confidence. Question 6 and 10 naman strongly related about motivation, and question 11 to 15 naman strongly related about anxiety. So it helps us to discover which questions belong together. So again, ang construct validity, it asks same construct ba talaga yung sinusukat ng related items. So next one, we have the concurrent validity. In concurrent validity, it means that it checks whether two or more tests or measures that are supposed to measure the same thing give similar or related results. So the important thing dito is that the measure are given or available at the same time. Let's have an example. Let's say we want to measure a student's English reading ability. We have test A, our newly created reading test, and meron naman tayong test B, an established reading test that already measures reading ability. So we give both tests to the same students, and if yung students got a high score in test A and also tends to score high sa test B, then the two measures are strongly strongly related. So that means that our new test has good concurrent validity. And we have the procedure. In the procedure, it says the scores on the measure should be correlated. So meaning, we compare the scores from the two measures and then i-check natin if they have a strong relationship. For example, yung test A and na scores and test B. If the scores are strongly correlated, and then we have the good concurrent validity. So, next one, we also have the convergent validity. And convergent validity, it means na i-check naman natin whether the different parts or factors of a test are related to each other in the way we expect them to be. Let's have an example. Gumawa tayo ng isang test para masukat ang English language ability. So, meron tayong different factors like vocabulary, reading comprehension, and grammar. Since these are all related to English ability, we expect them to have a positive correlation. So, meaning, if yung isang students, they perform well in one factor, they will generally also perform well sa ibang related factors natin. So, basically, yung mga parts ba ng test na dapat related is actually related. So, sa procedure natin, the correlation is done for the factor of the test. So, meaning, we compare the scores of the different factors and then i-check natin if they have positive relationship. For example, vocabulary, reading comprehension, grammar, and vocabulary. If yung factors nito, it shows expected positive correlation, that support convergent validity. So, if the factors show the expected positive correlation, that supports convergent validity. And then lastly, we have the divergent validity. Parang ito yung kabaliktaran nung kanina. It simply means that we check naman whether yung two factors that are expected to be different actually show different results. So, in other words, yung mga bagay ba na dapat magkaiba is magkaiba nga ba talaga? For example, yung module natin gives intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So, in intrinsic motivation, you study because you personally enjoy learning or you want to improve. And then, sa extrinsic motivation naman, you study because you want a reward, high score, praise, or others. So, if yung test natin is designed to treat this, if the test is designed to treat this as different factors, we may expect yung scores to have a negative correlation. So, meaning, as one goes higher, the other tends to go lower. So, for the procedure of this test, it's very, very simple. Correlation is done for the factors of the test. So, we compare the scores of the different factors and check the relationship. If yung factor that are expected to be different show the expected negative correlation, so that supports divergent validity. So to summarize. So to summarize these 7 types, let's begin sa content. When we say content, ano ba yung chine-check niya? Chine-check niya yung content ng test versus yung objectives. And when we say face validity, chine-check niya yung appearance and clarity ng isang test. When we say naman predictive, it checks yung future performance. And then when we say construct validity, chine-check whether yung items natin that measures the same construct. And then concurrent naman, 2 measures of the same characteristics. When i-measure niya and then when we have the concurrent, which check niya the 2 measures of the same characteristic. And we have the convergent, na chine-check yung related factors. And kabaliktaran naman when we have the divergent, which checks yung different factors. So that's all. I hope you learned something today. Thank you.